Should you DIY your law firm's tech strategy, or should you bring in the pros? Most law firms try to implement legal technology themselves to save a little money, but what if that decision is actually costing you more than you realize? In this video, we're going to break down the real cost of implementing legal tech yourself versus working with a tech consultant. Not just the obvious costs, but the hidden ones that show up in lost time, missed opportunities, and operational friction. Because once you see the full picture, it becomes much easier to decide what actually makes sense for your firm. Hi, I'm Ty Brown, an attorney and partner at Levantage AI Advisors for law firms. We work with small and mid-sized law firms to help them implement AI and legal technology in a way that actually improves operations, saves time, and supports their team instead of overwhelming them. This is something we see every day. And there's a clear pattern between firms that get results and those that don't. First, we'll talk about what legal tech implementation really involves because it's more complex than most firms expect. Then we'll look at why so many firms choose the DIY route in the first place. After that, we'll break down the real and often hidden costs of doing it yourself. Then we'll look at what changes when you bring in the right kind of guidance. And finally, I'll give you a simple way to decide which path actually makes sense for your law firm. Stick around until the end because I'm going to give you one simple question you can ask that will immediately tell you whether DIY is costing your firm more than it's saving. All right, let's get into it. One of the biggest misconceptions law firms have is thinking that implementing legal tech is just about choosing the right tool. It's not. The tool is actually the smallest part of the equation. What really matters is everything else around it. Before a tool ever works the way it's supposed to, your firm has to understand how work flows from start to finish. We talk about this every week. That means mapping out workflows, looking at how information moves, identifying where delays happen, where work is getting duplicated, where attorneys are spending time on tasks that they shouldn't be handling. Then comes process redesign. Because once you see the friction, you have to fix it. Otherwise, you're just layering technology on top of inefficiency. Sounds like a good plan, right? After that, there's change management. And this is where most implementations break down because people don't automatically adopt new systems just because they exist. They need guidance, they need clarity, they need to understand how their role changes. Then there's training, not once, but continuously. And finally, there's data migration, integrations, and security. All of this has to work together. So when firms say, we'll just figure it out ourselves, what they're really taking on is a full operational transformation, not just a software setup. Now, to be fair, there's a reason most firms take the DIY route. It feels logical. You're trying to be efficient. You already have smart people on your team, and at first glance, it seems like you can save money by handling implementation internally. Sometimes, for very small changes, that might be true. But the challenge is that legal tech implementation isn't linear. It's not just install the tool and move on. It touches workflows, people, systems, and client experience all at once. So, while DIY feels cheaper up front, it often creates complexity that isn't immediately visible. This is where things start to shift because the real cost of DIY isn't what you pay for the software. It's what happens all around it. First, there's time. Every hour spent figuring out a tool, troubleshooting issues, or adjusting workflows is time that is not billable, and that adds up pretty quickly. Then there's execution risk. Without a clear strategy, it's easy to choose the wrong tools, implement them partially, or create systems that don't actually improve anything. You end up with more dashboards, more logins, more confusion, not less. And then there's something most firms don't account for at all, the cultural impact. When implementation doesn't go smoothly, your team feels it. And guess who they blame? They get frustrated. They start creating workarounds. They lose trust in the tools and maybe a little bit in you. And over time, they become resistant to future changes. That's when technology stops being an advantage. It starts becoming a burden. Now, compare that to what happens when implementation is approached strategically. Instead of starting with tools, you start with workflows. You identify where the biggest inefficiencies are. You define what success actually looks like. Then you choose tools that support that outcome, not the other way around. Implementation happens in phases, so there's a clear sequence. Training is tied directly to how people work, and most importantly, there's accountability for adoption, because tools only create value when they're actually used correctly. What this does is remove trial and error. It reduces risk, and it significantly shortens the time it takes to see results. So, when you step back and compare the two approaches, the difference becomes clearer. DIY often looks cheaper because the upfront cost is lower, but the hidden costs of lost time, inefficiency, rework, and failed tools tend to outweigh that pretty quickly. On the other hand, bringing in the right guidance may cost more upfront, but it leads to faster implementation, stronger adoption, and better long-term results. So the question isn't really which one is cheaper. The real question is, which one gets you to the outcome you want? There are certain situations where DIY becomes especially risky if your workflows aren't already clearly defined, if you're trying to change multiple systems at once, if you've struggled with adoption in the past, if you're introducing AI into your firm for the first time, or if security and compliance are a concern. In those situations, the margin for error is pretty small, and the cost of getting it wrong is much higher. So, how do you decide what's right for your firm? It comes down to a few honest questions. Do you have experience implementing systems like this? Be honest. Can your firm afford the time it takes to figure it out through trial and error? Are your workflows already standardized? And what happens if this doesn't work? Because at the end of the day, this isn't a technology decision, it's a business decision. Now here's the question I mentioned earlier. If your implementation takes twice as long as expected and delivers half the results, what does that actually cost your firm? Not just in money, but in time, stress, and missed opportunities. This is one of those moments where you really need to get on the scale and look at the numbers. Don't be afraid of the numbers, even if you suspect you won't be happy. You need the feedback to make the necessary adjustments. If you don't like the numbers on the scale, you might want to rethink DIYing everything at your firm and get some professional help with your tech and processes. Legal technology can absolutely transform how your firm operates, but only when it's implemented with the right strategy behind it. If you want help evaluating your approach, mapping your workflows, and implementing AI and legal tech the right way without wasted time or risk, reach out to us at Levantage AI. We offer a free strategy call to help you figure out your next step. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.